Welcome to our My Story podcast. My name is Philip Thomas, pastor of Journey Elgin Church. We are about to begin part 2 of our story with JR and Angie Lopez. We ended part 1 with JR and Angie getting married. If you have not listened to part 1, I encourage you to find that on YouTube or where you listen to your podcast. Just search for Journey Elgin Church. But here we are, beginning and continuing the story of JR and Angie and what God has done in their lives. Let's begin part 2.
And so we get married, don't really know each other. We both came from that party lifestyle, and finally things are getting real. Just a lot of we started getting to know each other, so there was a lot of arguing, a lot of fighting involved and stuff, and it just started getting a little, I guess, toxic, and so we started talking, and at the time, Angie's sister was going to a church, and she started telling Angie about church and things like that, and saying you should come and stuff, and we ended up having Adriel in July. We have him in July, so we had the baby. And we started talking about, okay, maybe we should go to church. Maybe, there can be some change of something. I didn't know anything about the gospel, didn't know the word. But I was open to it because I was thinking, I've been to church before, Catholic church. So just go in there, kind of just listen to the priest do his thing. And all right, amen, we're done.
This was a little bit different, wasn't it?
Very different, very different. So we finally go after Adriel's born a month later. And, because Angie's like, let's go to this church. I was like, okay, let's go. And I just was like, whoa, what is going on here? When they were singing, they're clapping. And afterwards, there's a lot of tongues. They were doing a lot of tongues when they're, praying and stuff. And I was like, whoa, I have no idea what this is. I've never experienced this. And it just kind of freaked me out. I was like, I don't want to do this. This isn't what I signed up for.
Yeah.
So Angie, of course, she liked it. She enjoyed it.
Yes. Now y'all are married and recognizing there needs to be a change, right? Because you obviously had the party atmosphere whenever you first got together, and then life gets real. Angie, whenever you met JR and got into the relationship, did you see something, hopefully that something was different, or was it just, I'm ready to get in a relationship again and here's an opportunity?
When I met JR, I just thought he was so handsome. Really, he just had a beautiful smile, and I was like, wow, he's gorgeous. And I just, maybe I was drunk, or maybe I was not thinking straight, but I was like, I'm going to marry that man. I'm going to marry that guy. I don't know. He just doesn't belong with anyone here except for me. But, and there were some complications, obviously, with our lives. And, I really liked him, and I found myself pregnant again. And I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore with the abortion stuff. I have to stop, so I'm like, I had, kept my baby. But, during the beginning of our relationship, that first month, we were out there like everywhere, with the friends and family members, just out, doing all kind of stuff, partying and stuff. And because of who we were surrounding ourselves with and what we were doing, and nobody was ever sober and stuff, things started getting real twisted, and there was lots of rumors flying amongst the group of people we were with, and it got to the families and to us, and I was like, oh my gosh, my husband didn't trust me anymore because there was a rumor about me, and I was like, I don't know what to tell you. I really don't. I didn't do that, and I don't blame him. Like, if somebody says something, it's going to be hard to trust. You don't know what to think. You were never sober.
Yeah.
You don't know what to think. And that's what caused a lot of problems in our relationship in the beginning, you know, but I was pregnant. I'm like, oh, I don't want to be alone with this baby, you know, and I started feeling guilty too, because here I am with a third child, without a husband, you know, and I didn't want to raise the baby alone, you know, and I kind of like almost not, I didn't force him to marry me, but I put a lot of pressure and guilt on him, tons of that, you know, poor guy. So we marry each other. He marries me. He marries me, you know, when Adriel was 5 months. And I mean, it just, those little rumors just set a huge fire in our marriage, like not a good one. Like we were constantly at it.
Yeah.
Constantly.
So it just started off from a carefree party to then we're doing this just because find some redemption, find some stability, but then it's really built on a very flimsy foundation.
Very.
From the beginning.
Yeah. And you know, we got married, like I said, when I was 5 months pregnant. You know, our families were heavily involved in the marriage. It just made it worse. And I would, you know, cry to my sister. I'd call my sister a lot, you know, and by around this time, my sister had been going to a church for about a year. And, you know, me and Jared started going to a church in Austin, and he was liking it and everything. But my sister, you know, when I'd call and cry to her, and she'd be like, you just need to come here. You need to come here. This is where God is changing lives. You know, this is the place where you're going to get help. You know, I love it here. It's like family, you know. And I was like, I don't know. And Jared's like, I don't want to go anywhere. I like where we're at. I was like, we need to go there. You know, I trusted what she was saying, and, you know, he went, and we started going, and I had kind of already seen, you know, their worship style before. It wasn't like super, it wasn't a surprise or anything. But what stood out to me even more than that was all of the people afterwards coming to get to know who we were. You know, we were nobody in that place, and they just wanted to know who we were and hear our story and hear, you know, all about our past, and just take us out, and just, if you ever need anything, let's get your number, and just really, really, like, you know, make us feel very comfortable. And it stood out to me. And when you're broken, when you don't have any, I didn't have friends anymore. You know, we let all our friends go after all the drama. When you're broken like that, you're just like how I was in my past relationships. When you're broken, you get a little attention, you're thirsty, you're going to drink it, you know? And I did.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, wow, this is what I need, you know? And I started feeling comfortable, really comfortable quickly, you know, because there was always a open ear. You know, always lots of hugs, and let's go to lunch, you know, and all this stuff. So,
So JR, the worship style was obviously a huge change. Did you feel some of the same stuff as her, or what did you feel there at the beginning?
I wasn't really into it. You know, I was just.
So it wasn't something that was going to bring y'all closer together, because y'all both just kind of viewed it from two different directions.
No, in fact, we grew a little bit further apart, because I'm like, no, we need to go here. And he's like, no, something's not right. I don't want to go here. And I'm like, well, what do you know? You don't read the Bible.
Yeah.
I just started, because I had started reading the Bible when I got saved. So before I started going to church, you know, we were having our issues, you know, with our marriage because of all the stuff that happened in the beginning. And that's when I cried out, because I didn't really have anyone to turn to anymore. I had just had another baby, you know, our marriage was super rocky. And I finally just was like, you know what, I give up. I just want you. I just want the truth. I just need help. I need a change of life. I don't want to live like this anymore, I already wanted to start drinking again after I had Adriel, and it just, I was like, I'm going to go right back into it. We're going to end up split up and I'm going to have another kid. I just saw the pattern. So I cried out to God. I was like, I need help, and I got saved there in the apartment at the house, and, he led me to the Bible and I started getting into it. So, I was reading and stuff. I didn't understand a whole lot, but just enough. It was just enough to start doing something in my heart, and just, trying to trust the Lord, and and then that's when we started going there, to church, and because I had been reading, I started feeling a little puffed up, with the little understanding that I had. And I got a little proud. So when Jared would tell me things, I'm like, what do you know, and little by little, we started, fighting about it, and he didn't want to go. And the type of preaching I would hear, it's like, if you don't come here, you're not in the will of God, basically, it's just a certain style of preaching where, very, what's the word, exclusive? Type of thing. And so I was like, well, if he leaves, then we're not in the will of God, if he goes back to the other church, or just doesn't come, we're not going to be in the will of God. And I didn't want to be a single lady in the church, so I would fight with him, like, you need to stay here. Like, and I would kind of dominate him, and kind of start preaching at him, and little by little, like, kind of started stripping him of his role of a husband, pretty much, and I'm sure, I tore him down, in that way. And it took a major toll on our marriage, because we already came in with tons of issues, lots of not trusting each other, and all kind of stuff. So,
is that kind of how you felt? Did you feel that's what she was doing?
Yes, yeah. I did feel like, she was cutting me down and stuff. And I always thought highly of myself. Most of my life was like, well, I'm pretty intelligent. I can hold, intelligent conversations with most people and stuff. And there were things like, for instance, like I believed in, for a moment, in, we all worship one God. We all do it different ways. That was my mindset. And I remember telling her something like that. And she's like, no, that's not what the Bible says. It's not like that. I'm like, wait, what? And so it, in a way, her knowing more Bible knowledge than I did made me want to kind of like, well, let me see what's really in here. So I did start kind of reading, and a lot of it I didn't understand. I had no understanding. But I remember reading, I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, I see what she's saying. Oh, interesting. And, looking through the scriptures and stuff. But I just still had no understanding, and so that was my way of like, okay, well, I need to catch up to her, because she knows a lot more. And I'm just like, I don't know anything. And then I hear all this Christian terminology in the churches, and I'm like, what does that mean? Who's King David? Who are these people? I knew nothing. So it did get me into the Bible to start reading, because I would work evenings at the hospital during the week. And so she was in service Wednesdays, sometimes Mondays, Tuesdays, Fridays. And during my lunch break, I would get in the Bible and start reading a little bit and start kind of learning and stuff. And so, so it just, I did feel kind of inferior to her in a sense, but I was like, no, I'm not going to, let her dominate me. I'm going to push back. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm going to push back and show her that I can get this stuff and learn it. Maybe teach her a thing or two.
Yeah. So things are still pretty rocky, right? I mean, even though you are going to a church, both of you are at least, I mean, you have a very new, immature understanding of God, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're exploring God. So God is kind of becoming more real to y'all, but still not, you wouldn't say Lord of your life
Right.
at this time, right? So where does that go? Where does your relationship move from there?
Well, for me, I was there a lot. Like JR says, if there was revival, yes, it was Sunday morning, Sunday school, Sunday morning service, and then Sunday night service, and then Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night. And if it was fire, it was a Thursday night too. Just depending on what was going on with the evangelist and the preaching and all that. I was hearing tons of preaching, tons of it every day, or every service, and I was very, very busy, and lots of fellowshipping, with the people at church, like all the time. I was hardly ever home,
So it was either work or you were at church, some sort
most
of
of the
church
time.
function. Yeah.
Most of the time, I was really just home on Mondays and Tuesdays and Thursdays. So those were just kind of like days of rest, and if I could get in some study, like Bible study, that would be good. But it was hard to get it in because those were the only days I had in the week to catch up on like house stuff and just the kids and my husband. It was so bad, like it was hard to get any study time in or prayer life, anything like that. I was more consumed in going faithfully, be there, be there, be there.
Which is what was emphasized.
Very much.
Right. I mean, yeah.
Yes. And I did think it was strange. There were some red flags, like don't go online, okay? Let's not go online and start reading all the things about the church. Everyone says we're a cult and that we're brainwashed, and we're brainwashed by the blood of Jesus, and things like that. And it sounded good. I'm like, yeah, I'm brainwashed, and I'm like, huh, because they would say, if you do that, there was things said like, it's just Satan's strategy to try and take you out of the will of God, out of the church. It was always referred to as the will of God, and that all sounded good, like some good stuff, like for a new believer, the will of God, that sounds good.
Yeah.
I just, I do remember that, and I was like tempted to go and look, like, what are we talking about? What are they saying? But they're like, no, don't do that. There's stuff on, YouTube and stuff. Be careful what you look at on YouTube. Be careful what you look at on the internet. Do not have Facebook, and strongly encourage not to have Facebook. Social media. The more faithful I became, in attendance and service there, it was more, okay, well, it's time to be here on Wednesday nights. You need to start being here. You want to be here. You don't want to miss out on what God has for you. Because if you don't come to one service, God, you're going to miss out on what he has for you. And I'm like, well, dang, I need him right now. Like, our marriage is super messed up, so I need to be here, let's see. Then, we started to slowly not have TV, so there were some very noticeable things that were, didn't seem like normal, like the norm. But, the thing that I was told there is that we are set apart, we're, a true church of God, so we're going to look different. We need to be set apart. We're not like any other place. And that sounded like, wow, we're special,
Yeah.
And I felt very secure in doing these things. I felt real secure with those things. And, there was still lots of fighting at home, and as we, started going there was lots of, preaching where you're kind of strongly encouraged to bring your issues to the pastor, which sounded legit, you know, like, let's go get advice from pastor, you know. And it became a thing where, like, I found myself constantly telling on my husband, you know, and I would see that, you know, I would see couples going to the front, you know, after service to go speak to the pastor, and it became a thing where everyone sees the couple coming up, so you kind of, all your problems are kind of out exposed, you know, but it's justified through scripture that we confess our sins to one another, and so it all sounded right, you know. But there was like, I started seeing that there was no boundaries on this stuff. And you know, and as our problems continued, we kept going up there, and we would pray, you know, and he would give us some scriptures and pray real quick, you know, and just give us advice for, you know, 5-10 minutes and out the door, and then we're back at it again, like. And it, you know, it took a toll on the marriage that here I am running to this man constantly, you know, dragging JR, and it's just, it kind of was stripping him completely of his role again, like even more in another way.
So did you feel like all of these kind of religious things that were happening, like getting rid of the television, you know, going to, you know, feeling need to go to church more, and Angie, you're kind of deciding I'm gonna do this because this is what I believe is the will of God. For you, did that just cause more challenges in your relationship?
Absolutely.
I'm assuming.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I didn't like the idea of it or anything, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, well, the first marriage, you know, got divorced.
Yeah.
I left my son in El Paso, so I'm like, I'm married here second time. We have our son together. I'm like, I got to do something different.
I'm going to try to make this work.
So I was like, okay, I'm gonna start going. And she would tell me, let's go talk to pastor. Let's go talk to the pastor. And at first I was hesitant, like, no, I don't feel like sharing anything with some other man. But I was like, okay, fine. I started going, and, you know, like she said, tell us a little scripture or something. Okay, you know, just do this, do that. And that's it. There was really no change in me, you know, and I did start learning more, getting more knowledge, but I'm still an old wineskin. And, you know, we just, you know, things were okay at times when we were there at the church, but then we go home and it's like, wow, we're back at it, you know, fighting, finger pointing, and your fault, no, your fault, and back and forth the whole time. So I just really wasn't getting any help, you know, and I didn't know who to turn to help, you know, for our marriage or anything like that. And I kind of isolated myself from the family too, you know, because I all of a sudden became self-righteous. I'm like, you guys are doing wrong and y'all need to change and this and that, you know. And the pastor's like, well, you know, let them know, you know, they need to stop doing this or that or whatever, you know. And so they kind of stayed away too, you know, they don't want to be around us anymore. Yeah. And so I'm like kind of alone. I'm like, well, what can I do now, you know? So we just continued fighting and to finally one day it just got so bad, and, you know, I lost it. And I was like, I'm out of here. I'm gone. I'm done. I don't want to be married to you anymore. I'm done. I can't take this. I don't want to go to church anymore. I don't want anything to do with anything like that. So I leave, you know, and I'm back out there. It gets worse. The drinking, the drugs, just, you know, partying, you know, and then I have an affair. And, you know, during those times, you know, it did weigh on my conscience, you know, and I was like, well, I've never felt bad about it.
Never felt bad about that, yeah.
So, you know, and I remember just drinking and trying to tell some of my buddies, like, hey, Jesus he's real. Like, he's a good dude. Like, he's a good guy, you know? And they're like, well, we don't want to hear that Jesus stuff. I mean, what are you talking about that, you know? And, you know, if he was like that, like, you would be different or something. I'm just like, I would sit there and think, like, well, you do have a point. Yeah, well, just get back to drinking, whatever. And, you know, so I'm just for like several months, just doing that whole cycle. But I'm feeling guilty. I'm feeling bad about it. And I'm just like, man, no, I can't do this. You know, I don't get to really talk to my son and see him, and, you know, to Angie and the kids. And I'm just like, okay, let me see if I can come back. And, you know, I think Angie was open to it too. We started talking again, and I believe I was able to move back in. And, you know, I didn't tell her about the affair or anything. I just kept it to myself, and started kind of going to church again and stuff. And then that's when Angie approached the pastor and told him, hey, we would like to, you know, see if it's okay if Jared can stay permanently at the house and stuff.
So you were having to basically ask permission for JR to come back and live with you?
Yeah.
Or you felt the need to do that?
Well, it was kind of, you know, during our fights and stuff, sometimes I would call my pastor, you know, and be like, hey, it's getting rough and rowdy over here, you know, because we were physical with each other sometimes. And he's like, hey, pack him a bag. He needs to leave now. And I'm like, ooh, I got bills to pay, you know, like, I can't just do that. It's complicated, you know, we're married. And he's like, look, I can only be your pastor as much as you allow me to be. So in my head, I'm like, well, that means like I need to listen to what he's saying here, or I can't come to him for help. Pretty much.
Yeah.
Is kind of the message that I felt that was conveyed. And, you know, and that definitely got us into more like, it was getting bad, you know. And I was encouraged by the other sisters at the church, you know, like, you need to be accountable. You need to bring it. You need to go tell pastor. You need to. That was heavily emphasized. I'm like, what is the deal? I just wouldn't handle it like this on my own, you know. I would do something different. I don't know what I would do, but it wouldn't be this, you know. And so I felt like I had to go ask permission for him to come home, you know. And we went up there. And like I said, nothing's done in private in the office. It wasn't for us, and for a lot of other people either. We would see a lot of stuff that, you know, right up here. It would just be out in the open, just like this. And, you know, while people are, you know, fellowshipping in the sanctuary and
having one ear trying to figure out what's being talked about.
You know, I'm sure it happens, you know. And it was kind of embarrassing, and I was like, golly. So we asked him, you know, like, hey, you know, we're thinking about letting him come back. What do you think? And he was like, okay. You know, so it was always like, well, JR, have you repented? And, you know, he was like, yeah. He's like, okay, well, before you go home, you know, is there anything that you need to confess to your wife? I had no plans of asking. I kind of like, I just didn't want to know. Mm-hmm. You know, I just wanted to move forward and, you know, start over. So when he said that, my heart was just like, oh no, like I wouldn't have done that. Mm-hmm. This is not the way I would go about it. And I'm looking at Jared like, he didn't do anything, you know, and Jared's like, well, oh my gosh. You're like,
oh no.
In front of all of my friends here, I was like, oh my gosh. And Jared just said, well, yeah, I had an affair. The pastor was like, really? And just kind of looks at me like, okay. And I was so upset. I was upset that he did it, and I was upset that it was even asked.
That it came out in that circumstance.
Yes, yeah. And that it was in front of my church family.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, gosh, couldn't we just not have done that? You know? So it was bad. You know, we went home and we cried all night, both of us, and I just couldn't. I was so angry. And I was like, you got to go. In the morning, you're out, you know. And, you know, he left in the morning. And, you know, from there, I just didn't trust him anymore, and it was like there was one moment where I was fighting for my marriage and praying and on my knees and just praying and praying and praying, calling everyone for prayer and prayer and prayer, and I would pray so much about JR, and then it turned into JR fighting for the marriage, and it just kind of went back and forth like that for a little while, and for a few months, and somebody had given me a book called Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers, and it's like a Christian-based book, and it's a storyline kind of the Hosea and Gomer, and the book was very touching, very touching. I was stuck in it all night, all the time, but I'm mad at my husband, and and I thought about him like, yeah, maybe it's possible, that I can forgive him and take him back. But, I'd get done with the book and I'd be like, nah, there's no hope for a guy like that. Like, absolutely not, and he just always says that he's changed and Jesus changed him and Jesus changed him. And it's just never the case, and, I was waiting at one point for my divorce papers because he had been telling me we're divorcing. I don't want to be with you either, and I was always crying at church, and I would hear some sisters contending for the marriage, and then some sisters were like, no, you're going to end up old and abused like my mother, and she still gets cheated on, and God has a man for you, and so I would hear kind of all these things, and I would look in the Bible for like scripture on divorce, but I just wasn't understanding, Old Testament and New Testament standards, and I wasn't understanding a whole lot of things, and I would go to the leadership there at church and ask, like, is it okay? Like, they're like, well, you got grounds, definitely, you've been abandoned, he's had an affair, and I'm like, okay. They're like, we're not telling you to go get a divorce, but if you do, we got your back. And I was like, okay, I just want an answer. Can I get a divorce or not? I didn't really have like a serious prayer life. I would pray, but it was like, it's just not how it is today. I was just growing very slowly in a place where it's mostly like religious stuff and what we do and our standards and not too much of the heart of God. It was hard to kind of get to that place, so I just wanted an answer. I didn't want to like develop my relationship with the Lord and get that from him. And it was like mainly like, come to me, come to the pastor for what you need, more emphasized over, getting your answers from the word and your long time with the Lord and stuff, major life decision type answers like that, and, I was always confused, and I just gave up. I was like, I'm tired, so I hadn't got any papers from JR, and I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to get him first. I'm not going to let anybody hurt me again. And I went and found the meanest attorney I could find in Austin, and just I filed, and we were doing our weekly visitations with our little boy. He was just, I don't know, 1.5, 2 years old, maybe 2 years old at the time. And during one of his visits to come pick him up on a Friday, I had already filed that Monday. And JR gets out of the car, and I'm like, so where are my papers? Where are the papers at? It's been weeks and weeks and weeks. It's been a couple months. And I saw a look in JR's eyes, and he was like, oh, can I talk to you about that? And I was like, oh no, he's had a change of heart. I filed already, and I was like, no, don't fall for that. I was like, don't worry about it. I already filed on Monday. And he was like, oh, you did? And I was like, yeah, don't worry. And he just looked so broken. And I was sad, but I was like, no, he needs to learn, And I'm so sorry, but that's just my mindset at the time, right? And, so he takes off with the baby, and I continue, going to church and getting heavily involved. I'm leader of the nursery at one point. I'm singing at every Saturday concert. I'm singing every service, writing their music for other bands there, and just very heavily involved. Outreaches every Saturday, concerts every Saturday, constant church life, right?
Yeah. So basically, you get to the divorce, and then you just immerse yourself in church.
Well, before the divorce.
So it's still hasn't happened yet.
Right, not yet. And I just, as soon as we separated, it the preaching, it was like, when you're single, you can really devote yourself to the Lord, which the way it is there, it's like by doing things, and so that's what I was doing, lots of things, right? And feeling important, feeling used by God, and so I thought, basically kind of replace my relationship with him with lots of things of him.
Yeah.
And, there was a point where JR, I think he had come to visit. Maybe you had at one point after I found out that about the affair and we split off and I filed, he had his encounter with the Lord. So that's kind of where, I just didn't know because we were separated. So he has his encounter before the divorce took place. So while the divorce is pending, this goes down.
Okay, yeah. So you confess in front of, right? The pastor asks you to confess.
Yes.
And you have that rough evening. I can just imagine, how that is, and you get asked basically to leave, right, from that point. So where are you? What are you feeling at that moment? Are you just kind of, oh, I'm finally done with this, or like, oh, I can't believe this, I want this to work? What's going on with you?
At the time, so when we talked to the pastor and, saying if it's okay and everything, I wasn't expecting the question. When he asked me, I was like, I've had an affair. And
did you even, like, this is just fascinating to think about. Mm-hmm. So you weren't expecting the question.
No.
So did you just hear it? Did you just felt compelled to say yes? Or did you process for a minute and even think about what that meant by answering right there in front of everybody?
I think it was just that I had such a guilty conscience that it was weighing on me.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a way of like, all right, this is how I can tell her.
Yeah.
Because at some point,
because there's no good way to do that.
Exactly. It started weighing on me over time. And I was like, I need to tell her. I need to let her know. And I think when he asked me, is there anything you want to let her know? And then that was my opportunity to say, okay, you know what? Let me get this off my chest and my conscience. So I had an affair. He looks at me, well, why would you say that? I was like, well, you asked me a question. And, it's like, oh, I'm surprised you're still alive standing here. I'm surprised you haven't been struck by lightning. And I'm just like, oh, yeah, I guess you're right. Maybe I should have been dead or something. But yeah, we go home. Angie says, once you get all your stuff, you need to go. And I was like, man, I was like, well, pleading with her, like, no, I want to make this work. I don't want to divorce. I thought we could do something good here. So I end up going. I leave and I'm trying to get back out on the party seat and everything, and it just wasn't working. It just wasn't working. And probably like about 2-3 months before that, I was in a car accident. And so they gave me some like pain meds and stuff. And it just happened one day when I'm there in the room, the bedroom, when I was staying with my parents. I'm sitting there and I'm like, you know what? She's telling me, she wants to divorce. Here I am, I don't really get to see my son, and I'm a horrible father, and I'm just failing in everything now. I'm like, I thought I've had a pretty good life where I made wise choices and had, outcomes I expected. And this time it's like, I just couldn't do anything. And I was like, well, she doesn't want me, and I felt worthless, And I remember just sitting there on the edge of the bed, and I'm looking, and there's some pill bottles there, and I'm like, I could just end it all here. What's the point of living if I'm gonna fail this second marriage, not be able to see my son much either, and there's no point living. So I was like, you know what, I can take those all right now. But then deep down, something inside me was like, no. And I paused for a moment, and I was like, you know what? It just came out. The words was just, Jesus, if you can, please help me because I need you. After I said that, I literally, the room just filled with his love. I could feel his love. I felt his mercy, his grace, his forgiveness. And I was like, wow, I was just flooded with all these emotions that I've never felt any love like that ever. And instantly I started weeping. I was crying, and I was like, oh my gosh, what have I done? I've hurt your daughters. I've hurt your children. I've been a horrible person my entire life. I've done everything I wanted to do, and it's gotten me nowhere. And I was like, I'm sorry. And I started realizing, like, oh my gosh, like, I love my wife. I love my children. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. What am I doing? It was like if the veil just came off my eyes and I could just see clear. And I was crying, and I just started praying, and it was literally like Jesus was holding me as if I was a child. And everything came back to me. I remember being touched wrong, and I'm like, now I'm touched right. And this is amazing. And I'm like, it doesn't hurt anymore. That sting from that, when it happened when I was 4 years old, no longer stung anymore. And I was at peace. And I was like, man. And I was like, I felt this urgency of like, okay, I need to make things right. I need to repair this marriage. I need to repair these relationships that I've damaged with everyone, And so, I'm there weeping and crying, and I just start praising God. I'm thanking him for everything, and I'm just enjoying his presence. And I started reading the Bible. Things just started coming alive to me. I'm like, whoa, I've never seen that before. I've read it, but now I get what it's saying, and I'm just seeing love, 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 love. And I'm like, whoa, I've never known love, and now I do, And, that whole night I was listening to sermons and all kinds of things, and God was just putting the right things in my path, And I was like, okay, I'm ready. The following day I started praying. I was like, Lord, I need a church. I feel like I need to get into a church. I need to go somewhere where I can grow and be rooted, And sure enough, I was praying on it. I'm looking around, and I'm pulling up the Google Maps, and there's all these churches around. And I'm like, well, let me see what this is about. I pull it up. I'm like, no, I'm not feeling any peace about that. I'll pull up another one. And out of nowhere, all of a sudden, this little bitty church just pops up on the map. And I'm like, wait, that's like literally down the street, from where my parents live. And I'm like, I've never seen this church before. Well, you know what? I'm going to have to go. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go Sunday and check it out and just get a feel for it. And sure enough, I went, and I was like, oh, wow. I felt peace with it and everything. Met the pastor there and everything. Told him what was going on. And, he prayed with me. At one point, he even called Angie, and he was like, let me call her. I'll see if, if there's love there, maybe there's hope for your marriage and stuff. And I told him, I was like, now I feel like I need to fight for my marriage like never before. Now I understand my role as a man, as a son. I'm a son too. So now I know, like, the father, he's my father. I'm his son, Jesus' bride. So, I'm just full of joy and excited. And, calls Angie, talks to her and everything. And Angie's like, no, he's just being religious. Because, I started telling her, I'm like, Angie, I had this amazing encounter. You got to hear me out. And she's like, no, I don't want to hear
You didn't want to hear that.
No, at that time, her heart was hardened towards me. And there was no way I can get through to her. But, I still fasted. I was praying, just believing for the marriage. But at the same time, I was like, Lord, you got to, do something with me. Do something with me. Let her see there's a change or something different, And, kept going to church, started growing there and everything. And maybe about a month and a half, 2 months later, I was like, okay, Lord, I think I'm ready to go to the church that Angie was going to, that I had left. And I'm going to see if I can get back with her. I'm going to show her that I'm willing to go to church, even if it's that church, So I remember going in and right away I got intercepted by one of the ushers and they're like, hey, let me sit you down over here. And I'm like, well, my wife and children are over there. He's like, no, you need to just come sit over here. And I'm like, okay, fine. All right. I'll be a good Christian, not put up a fight or anything. I'll listen. So I went, sat down, and I see her on the other end. And I'm just sitting there for a little bit, just like, all right, cool. And then the pastor comes, sits right by next to me. And he's like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, well, I came to fight for my marriage and, to fix things with my wife and the kids. I want to repair things. He's like, well, you shouldn't be coming here anymore. You Angie doesn't want anything to do with you. And I'm like, well, I get that. I mean, she's hurt. But I said, now I had an encounter with Jesus and like, I'm really saved now. He was like, well, no, he's like, she doesn't want to be with you. And, divorce is okay, so, just don't come anymore. I'm like, no. It's like, I've been reading my Bible and divorce is not okay. I believe when Jesus was talking about divorce, when they asked him about it, he was referring to the Jews at the time, I was like, I understand it differently, but I don't think, I know I did wrong, but I want to show her that I am a changed man in Christ. And he was like, well, I hear what you're saying. You kind of remind me of Paul, because when Paul got saved right away, he wanted to make things right and was urgent, but you know what? It's not going to work, but just don't come here anymore. You can stay for the service if you want, or you can leave, but you're not welcome to come here anymore. And so in that moment, I was like, it was like God gave me peace, like, don't worry. You're my son. I got you. Don't rely on any man. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'm just going to keep it with the Lord. So, ended up going home and praying and getting the word. And I knew I was like, I can't do it through her church because obviously they don't want me anymore. And I couldn't blame them. They were upset I hurt her. I did wrong, but I was like, but I'm changed, at the same time. And, I just kept praying and getting alone with God. And that's one thing, is that it was spending time with Jesus and God alone in my prayer closet that really helped me, to grow and to really get, his word, to fall in love with him and everything. And I kept trying here and there with Angie, trying to get her to maybe open her heart towards me, and it just pushed her away. And I got some orders that the divorce was in process and stuff. And I was like, oh no, it's like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm just gonna keep believing you, Lord. I'm gonna keep believing. Anything can happen. Miracles can happen. I mean, you changed me, and who would have thought? A couple of months go by. Finally, the divorce goes through, and when the divorce went through, and I finally got, the final divorce decree and everything, I was like, I said, you know what, Lord, I fought, and for my marriage, but I focused on Angie and the kids. I'm really going to focus on you now. I said, you have my full attention. I'm going to serve you. And I just want to grow, and I will leave her alone. I will leave her alone. I'll just go there for my son, pick him up when it's my appointed time, drop him off. I won't bother her. I won't do anything. So that's what I said. I prayed. I got peace about it, and just continued going to church.
Yeah. So now you're divorced. You're kind of at that point. I guess I'm moving in a different direction, right? Not that you're cutting off completely, but you recognize, well, my fighting for the marriage didn't work out the way that I thought it was going to.
Exactly.
So now, and Angie, at this time when the divorce goes through, you've been very involved in your church, kind of immersing yourself in that. Are you just relieved, kind of a good riddance? Finally, this is done now?
Yeah, because I mean, in the beginning, JR was pursuing still a lot before, he started to have his transformation, and he was scary. I was terrified of JR, and I don't know, he did a few things that kind of freaked me out, and I was just like, man, this dude's scaring me, He came in the house one time.
So a little stalkerish.
A little, and I'd be like, what the heck are you doing here? And it just was very off-putting and scary. And a lot of stuff I was hearing, at church sounded really scary too. Like, I was just starting to become very fearful. There was lots of fear-driven things being thrown around, and I felt protected only if I was at church. And it's like, if I wasn't, I felt like, ugh, anything can happen. Like, I need to be with these people, like, constantly,
And that's kind of what was being taught, basically, in a sense. In a sense. I mean, if it made you feel that way, that's...
Yeah. There was just so many stories, about people who left, that place of worship, that, they ended up in poverty, or they ended up in divorce, died, so-and-so went back to the gang life, and wasn't but 3-4 months later, he left God altogether and eventually got shot out there. And, and I'm like, dang, I don't want to go through that. I was always scared, so, just stuff like that. And then my husband was, like bothering me a lot, before, like I said, before he changed. And, there was one time near Christmas that he had come knocking on the house, before the divorce was final, and I was like, you better leave now, or I'm going to call my attorney, I'm going to call the cops. He was like, I need to tell you something. And I was like, absolutely not, you need to leave now. He was like, please, I got to tell you something. I never knew what it was that he wanted to talk about, because I was so scared, and that was that. A little bit more time went on, and our divorce was finalized in April 2016. And I believe that same month I was able to buy a house. God blessed me and my kids with our first house. And it was so awesome, because before that I could not buy a bag of dirt on credit, like nothing, I was just really irresponsible, with my finances and stuff. And I was just so excited, about all that, and that I was doing all these things in church, and that I was so faithful, and I went to every service. And, JR stopped, I did start to see a change, that he stopped texting all the time. There was no more fighting for things in the house, like, I need to get my blender, or I need to, just like petty things like that. We were so petty. But all that has stopped, all him showing up at places stopped, and there wasn't any arguing or phone calls anymore. It started to stop, But I didn't see it as a sign of like, oh, he's different now. He has the Lord or anything. And I knew he had visited a church because, yes, his pastor did call and ask me for prayer before the divorce was finalized. And I told my pastor, I'm like, hey, this pastor called praying, asking if I could pray with him about my marriage. He was like, what? He should not be calling any of our girls for prayer. You have a pastor. Don't let him do that again. Don't let him do that again. You tell him that he needs to call me.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh. At the time, I was like, oh, more safety.
Yeah.
More safety. More security in this place with these people here.
Thank you for listening to our My Story podcast. Join us next week as we conclude our story with JR and Angie Lopez. See you next week.